Thank you.
Good evening. I am. Good evening. Can you hear me? No. Good evening. Yes.
Let me see if mine works.
Good evening. No. Hello? This is not looking really good. Good evening. No, his not working.
Test 1, 2.
Check, test.
Hello, hello,
Yeah.
hello, hello.
Are you,
Test,
and you're
test,
holding
test.
the button?
Test, test, test.
Go ahead and try now.
Hello, there we go. Good evening. I'd like to call to order a regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education, Norman Public Schools. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Cindy Nashert.
Here.
Chad Weiss.
Here.
Dirk O'Hara.
Here.
Linda Sexton.
Here.
Alex Regiers.
Here.
If we would please stand and do the pledge. All right, next we have some wonderful awards. Glad to see the place full. So we're going to start with Melissa Hunt and Jamie Rensel.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Dr. Amelia Reno, good evening. I'm here to present Miss Melissa Hunt, a 7th grade math teacher at Whittier. She's been the Math Couts coach, and she had a fabulous year with her kiddos being state champions. So she's got a few of representatives here with her tonight. I'll let you introduce their names really fast and take a fun picture.
This was my first year as the Math Counts coach, and Dr. Brooks really was a support to me. We wouldn't have had such a great year without the great kids we have. This is Annika and William. They were 2 of our state qualifiers for the state competition this year. Out of our 7 total, the others couldn't be here tonight, but thank you guys for recognizing us.
Yeah, so special thank you to the parents for all of the hard work too. So if you'll stand real quick, I know you were taking pictures. Thank you.
Next up, Athletic Awards, Coach O'Hara.
So I was thinking, man, it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've been called a coach. That's good, that's good. Dr. Millerino, members of the Board of Education, I'd like to take this time to tell you each thank you for allowing us this time to recognize and celebrate our student athletes and teams from our spring sports season that had successful years. Before we get to those recognitions, just a few things that I want to add real quick, because I do believe there are a couple of groups that deserve some special recognition because of that success. The first group is the parents, the grandparents, and the support group that these student athletes have had throughout not only this year, but all of those years. So parents, grandparents, support group of these individuals, please stand so we can give you a round of applause for a job well done, if you don't mind, please. The second group is our coaches, and obviously, without our coaches, this would not be possible as well. The time, the sacrifice, the commitment they make towards their student athletes, sacrificing from their own families. I'm a firm believer. One of my favorite sayings is a good coach can impact the outcome of a game, but a great coach can impact the outcome of a life. And I firmly believe that we have coaches in this room tonight and across our district that have that ability to do so. So let's give our coaches a round of applause for a job well done as well. I do believe that there are all kinds of levels of success, all-state, state championships, state runner-ups, but I also feel like that we have those type of successes not only in that realm of it, but also on a daily basis. And to give you an example of that, we had 23 Central Oklahoma Athletic Conference selections, 14 all-region selections, 14 all-state selections, 3 regional team champions, 1 team state runner-up, 2 individual state runner-ups, and 3 team state champions from our 2 high schools. I think that deserves a round of applause as well for a job well done. And first up with our recognition tonight will be the Norman North Boys head golf coach, Ryan Rayner.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, everyone, for recognizing our team. First, I'd like to introduce the 5 guys that took care of business for most of the year for us. Jake Hopper is not here. He's currently traveling to a tournament. We've got Josh Stewart. Please stand and wave. Oh, come on up. Yeah, come on up.
Come on up, Josh.
Leighton Kyle, Mac Moore, and Max Cronge. While they're coming up, I'd like to highlight some of these guys' accomplishments this year. Collectively, they won 8 of the 10 tournaments we played, 1 runner-up, and we accomplished a team scoring average of 297.62. And for those that aren't familiar with the way golf works, we play 5 per tournament and we count 4 scores. So that averages out to a 74.4 average per the 4 counting scores, which in high school golf is really fantastic. So I'd like to give them a round of applause for what they've done there. Jake's not here, but to highlight his success, he ended the year with a 72.6 scoring average, collecting 1 win, 2 runners-up, 6 top 5s, and 8 top 10s. Josh Stewart rounded out the year with a 73.7 scoring average, 1 win, 2 runner-ups, and 6 top 5s. Leighton Kyle, 75.8 scoring average, 1 runner-up, 2 top 10s. Mac Moore, 78 scoring average with 1 top 10, and Max Cronge with a 79 scoring average and 1 top 5. Collectively, very impressive for 5 high school kids. Future plans for Jake, he's going to be joining the OU golf team, which most of you may know is a pretty solid program, having a lot of success. And then Leighton, also graduating this year, is pursuing a degree in engineering at OSU. A lot of the reason we had success on our team this year was from the leadership from Jake, Josh, Leighton, Max, and Mac. They took ownership in what they did day in and day out. They made no excuses. Our motto was we either find a way or we find an excuse, and these gentlemen found a way. They were consistent in what they did. They showed a lot of grit, a lot of tenacity, and they hung in there when things were tough. It was a mindset from the day we began, and that's why they're standing up here today. Good job, guys.
He didn't know that I took it. That's all right. I'm kidding.
Bring Leighton up, wasn't he? And second runner up, wasn't he? Is that right? Yeah. Individual second runner up and then all stickers.
Well, I guess I forgot to mention that Leighton and Jake were both all-state selections by their performances at state. We didn't even have to vote on them. They took care of business well enough that they were automatic bids. And then Leighton was an individual runner-up with a gritty performance at state. Very few people knew what he endured physically to accomplish that. Had some physical ailments. Again, the mindset of we find a way or we find an excuse, and Leighton found a way. So congrats, Leighton.
And just in case anybody was wondering, I can confirm as far as the average golf score, Mr. Miller's average golf score is not a 74.2. I can confirm that. It's close, but it is not a 74 point. It's no, I don't get to go play anymore. Dr. Nick works me too hard, so I'm constantly working. All right, up next with Norman North Girls Golf head coach Butch Roberts.
Hey guys, thanks everybody for having us. Thrilled to be here. We didn't have quite the team success the boys did, but that'd be hard to accomplish. But we did qualify for state, and I wouldn't have traded this year for anything. We're here to recognize my one senior this year who was named OCA All-State. She really set the bar high for what a coach wants a senior leader to be, both in not only her play, but how she conducts herself on the course and in the classroom. 4.0 student. I know that her parents and I are thrilled that we're going to get to go watch her play in the All-State game in July. And we're also really, really excited about what the future holds as she will be continuing not only her education but her golf at Oklahoma City University next year. So I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to recognize Blaine Bruton. Blaine did have an individual champion at the John Marshall tournament this year in Guthrie at Cedar Valley.
Come up to the front. I know you want to come up here and take a picture. Get up here. You can come closer. Retired can come closer.
Appreciate you, Coach. Good job. All right, up next with Norman North Boys Soccer head coach Khalil bin Aluhaj.
Thank you, TD. Thank you, Board of Educators and Dr. Nick. My name is Khalil bin Aluhaj. I am an adjunct coach at Norman North, and I've had the honor of coaching 6 different years at Norman North High School, 2 as an assistant coach for Gio Claros in 2011 and 2012. And then the last 4 years as the head coach. Norman North has a very rich history as a soccer program. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but we've had some fantastic coaches over the years. Gordon has done a great job for Norman in general as a community at Norman High as well. And then Brian Young was the first soccer coach at North and was such an ambitious leader and set the bar high for our program. And I'm very proud of the young men here that represent the program well and continue to live that legacy of being a North soccer team. To start our season, it wasn't ideal. We lost our first game in a shootout to Norman High, but we also continued the season in not the most spectacular fashion. Our first 7 games, we were 2-5. But then we went on to our yearly trip to Alabama, Gulf Shores, where we get to compete in a tournament out of state. And it's a fantastic time for the boys to unite, to gain chemistry together, and create memories and bond. Since that trip, we went undefeated. And in our last 7 games, we allowed 0 goals. To finish our regular season play, we played Mustang. And the year before, last year we lost in the state quarterfinals 6-1 against Mustang. So a lot was on the line, and with about 10 to 12 minutes left, Gabe Engel scored a header to put us as the district champion, give us a first seed into playoffs. From there, we went into the playoffs and eventually faced Mustang again in the state finals. And that win would mean a lot more. With about 2 minutes left in the game, again, Gabe Engel headed the ball past the goalie to win the state finals. So very proud of these boys for all they've done. And I'd like to bring all of the players up here to acknowledge them as well. So boys, will you come on up? So while they're walking up, I'd like to just list off a few different things. First, there are a lot of players here tonight, but there are several players that had a role in our success as a program this year, several of which have already graduated. Every single moment that the boys got to share with the older guys left an imprint on them and helped them to achieve the success they had this season. So I'd like to acknowledge those players. But for this senior class, we have Carter Higgins, Carlos Vara, Bon Blackman, Ethan Henley, Jake Tadlock, Nick Dionisio, Sujal Shrestha, Parker Foley, Jose Cardenas, and Gabe Engel. If you guys would step forward, I'd like to give you guys a hand. From these seniors, we have 3 that made All-State this year: Carter Higgins in goal, Bon Blackman at forward, and Nick Dionisio on our back line. So round of applause for those 3. Some of the things that, some of the awards that we received. Oh, it is, I'm sorry. We had all city voted by all the coaches around the state to the Oklahoman. Carson Newmark achieved all city honors, and honorable mentions were Boston Carroll, Gabe Engel, and Will Sutherland. All conference honors go to Owen Whitman and Carson Newmark. All district go to Boston Carroll, Miguel Madrigal, Carlos Vara, Jose Cardenas, and Alex Sani. And although our JV is not here today, they also had an undefeated season, winning the final tournament at Edmond North this year as well. So great all across the board. Undefeated, yeah. And then for our entire program, cumulatively, we had a 3.56 GPA, so a very well-rounded group that did it on and off the field. So well done to them. None of this is possible without the support of our community. This community has had such an impact on me and my life, and I'm honored to be able to be a guide for these young men. And there's so many people that I have to thank. Our managers who are not here tonight: Rayan Raza, Corey Hauser, Aiden Neese, and Sohail Hami. They're incredible people that helped tremendously. Our coaching staff is fantastic. Sage Moore, Joey Foote, Seth Liddell, Sven Van Over, I can't even say it. And then Simon Weishman and Zach Miller. We wouldn't have the coaching staff that we have. We have 2 extra coaches that are supported by our Booster Club, and our Booster Club is a huge thanks goes out to them for everything that they do. Our president was Lisa Dionisio this year, and April Whitman was vice president, as well as treasurer Angie Crandall. But so many before them and underneath them have helped out. Scott Bettigrew did a fantastic job this year, providing so much support to our team in the midst of a chaotic year for the training staff. I can't forget to thank Courtney Walker, who had her last season with us this year, and I'm so thankful for the support that she gave me as a first-time head coach at North, and she was fantastic for all of these boys on the field and off the field. I'd like to thank TD and his staff as well. They were tremendous. My wife, Pal, who endured me sacrificing a lot of hours and took care of our 6-month-old while I was coaching. Trevor and Brandon on the girls' side, and then also a shout out to Daniel of DD Media, who provided a ton of photos and videos for our team. But this is our program, these are our boys. Thank you so much for all your support.
Yeah, get in there.
Parents in the back, you can come to the front and take pictures if you'd like. Stay there till all cameras are down. Great job, guys.
Good job, guys. All right, up next, we have Norman North Girls Soccer and assistant coach Bria Jansing.
All right, so it's kind of difficult to follow Khalil's lead on that. So, I mean, because I'm filling in for Trevor. So Trevor LaFoon is our head coach, and then Brandon Couch is the assistant coach, and then Elena Weber and myself are the JV coaches that help out as well. And so he's out of the country, so I got thrown into this, and like I said, not nearly as prepared as Khalil is, because Trevor sent this little tiny snippet that's just like, we did great, fantastic, thank you. So, it's very much Trevor. But for all intents and purposes, the girls program has been having lots of success the last 3 years. We've gone to, well, it would have been with a COVID year, but so 19 and 20, we were state champions both years. 19 and 21. 20, we only played 3 games, won all 3. So our first season was 13 and 3, and we won state. And then the COVID year, we were 3-0. And then last year, we were 16 and 0 and won state. And then this year, we were 14 and 2, and we're the state runners up. So very, very good legacy that's coming out of this program. The three girls that are here this evening as part of the 23 for the varsity, due to everybody being out of town and whatnot, they were on varsity all 4 years. So they're a part of that. So our record was 46 and 5 in a 4-year span that they were a part of this program. So also, we want to thank the community as well. Yeah, ladies, will you come up here, the 3 of you? Becca Tweedy, Hadley Horn, and London Furnish are my 3. And then, come on up. We don't have the plethora the boys had. But absolutely want to thank the community. The soccer games are really cool because we end up having a lot of the community support and people that come and help out and are a part of our program in many different forms and fashions. So, and then also, so Becca Tweedy and London Furnish were both of our All-Staters. And so Becca Tweedy is, she was for midfield forward, was what she was nominated for, and London Furnish was for defense. And both of them, they didn't really have to vote. They were fantastic players. Becca is continuing on at UCO, so she'll be playing there in the fall, and London is continuing on at Washburn. And then Hadley is actually continuing on at Missouri Southern, is that right? Yes, okay. So there, and then we had 9 seniors, and 6 of our 9 seniors are all going to play collegiately in the fall. So very proud of these young ladies and all of their accomplishments, and thank you to their parents and the community for helping us out, and TD and you guys. So that's it. That's all I got.
Good job. All right, up next, Norman North Girls Track Assistant Coach Missy Smith.
This year has been one of the most exciting years in our track program. This is my 4th year at Norman North, and we sent the most athletes that we have sent to state, and I can't even tell you how long, definitely since I've been at North, and it was a very exciting year. One of the most exciting things that happened this year was actually in the classroom and not even on the athletic field. We knew our kids were taking care of business out at practice and at the meets and every day, but what we couldn't see always is the hard work they were putting in, the late nights with the homework, the academics. And our girls were one of 7 schools that tied for the academic state championship with our women. And it was an exciting accomplishment. They finished with a 4.0 GPA. So I've got a small group of those girls up here, if you would come join me. We've got Devin, Stevie, Ella, and Reagan. Like I said, this is a very small sample of what we did and just even a drop in the bucket of what we did athletically, and I cannot wait to see where we go. We're a young program, and we've got a lot to accomplish yet. So, like I said, small group of them, but all 4.0 this year.
Yeah. Good job, ladies. Good job, Coach. Thank you. All right, up next, Norman North slow pitch softball assistant coach Trey Palico.
Yes, I just coached. It's not about me, but I did coach in the Large West Fast Pitch All-State game this weekend with Tylee Liggins, also a Norman North softball athlete. And this weekend, we get to watch Riley Bottom in the All-State game. Is this weekend, this Saturday at Oklahoma Christian. We'll be there. But a little bit about Riley Bottom. Riley, go ahead and come on up. This is her favorite part, is when she gets to be front and center. And Riley's been in the program for 4 years. A little bit about Riley. One, obviously, she's an exceptional softball player and athlete for Norman North. Things that to me are special about Riley is during her time here, she's had a 4.0 GPA. I feel like she works 50 hours a week and not at softball. Like, she actually works, and she is probably one of the best communicators that I've ever had during my career as a coach, period. In 15 plus years, she always lets us know when she's going to be there, when she can't be there, and is still able to be a leader, not only at her job, but in her workspace at softball. So to me, that's as big an accomplishment as any, and I know, and hopefully her parents will know, that she is set up for success way beyond what she's done right here, right now. With that being said, she will be going to Arkansas. She is going to do interior design. So if anybody, just putting a plug out there, Riley's your girl. Okay, all right. But again, thankful for Riley and what she's done for our program, and that she has the honor of being named All-State Slow Pitch Softball, and will be playing this Saturday in the game for the Slow Pitch All-State. Riley Bottom, everybody.
Coach, thanks for coming. Absolutely. All right, up next from Norman High School, we have Norman High track assistant coach Monica Boyd.
Hello, thanks for having us tonight. I wanted to introduce Devin. He's the son of LaToya Randall, and fun fact, she and I were actually teammates together back in the early 90s at Norman High, so it's kind of exciting. I would say about Devin, he's probably maybe one of the most improved sprinters in the entire state. Last year, he did not even qualify for state because of an injury, and this year, he was a runner-up, and he is only a sophomore, so it's very impressive. His 10.44 time is the fastest time in the 100 at Norman High since the split of the two high schools. And we really think he's got a chance to break our school record, which is only 10.34. So a tenth of a second, maybe half a step. So I think he's going to do it, which we're really excited about. And which is saying a lot. Just we've got a really impressive tradition at Norman High in track and field. And he's also the starting running back for the football team. And I think he's going to do some great things this year in that as well. And he's had some tremendous growth in the classroom and on the track. And he's just got a quiet confidence that we love about him. Sometimes sprinters can be a little explosive personalities, which makes us good at what we do. But I think what we love about him is he just leads with a quiet confidence and leaves it all out on the track. So we appreciate that about him. So thanks, Devin.
So, Coach, Devin. Coach at State, I got to watch him run, and he got beat by a senior, correct? Just by a step? You can keep smiling and talking. I'm just going to talk behind you. It's all good. Yeah, and he's going to the guy at OU, right? Yep, he's a defensive senior, but it was only like a step. He literally got beat by a step, so work on the blocks, like I know what I'm talking about.
All right, up next, we have Norman High girls head soccer coach Kevin Chesley.
I don't really know what all I'm supposed to say. I spent the last 7 years as the boys' assistant coach under Coach Drummond. This is my first year doing the girls. We went 8-7, so we finished above 500, and we won the Deer Creek tournament. I think injury. Jenna Cabness was one of my seniors. She was voted All-State, but then Murphy Chesley, who's also my daughter, was voted captain. She tore her ACL 2 weeks before our season started. The last 3 weeks of the season, we had kind of concussion palooza. Had about 4 girls out with concussions, and we didn't qualify for state, but I think injury was a big part of that, and there's a lot of hope for next year. It's a very good program, and Jen and Murphy were very vital in developing that culture and hoping it'll continue. So we finished, I think we had a 3.9 GPA, and we were a distinguished academic team, so we were top 3 in 6A, and just their work on and off the field and in and out of the classroom I think is pretty vital. So this is Jenna Cabness, who's All-State.
Always got to take care of those coaches, whether it's during the regular day or here. All right, up next is our Norman High boys head soccer coach, Gordon Drummond.
Thank you, TD. Khalil, congratulations. What a great season. We had a good season. We had 12-5 record. We were conference champions. We were 6-1 in district. And we made it just to the second round, Khalil, just to the second round. And we did so thanks to the two young men that we're going to celebrate tonight. Dylan and Quinn, would you come forward, please? Dylan Garn was a team captain, our team MVP, and our team's leading scorer. Dylan scored 9 goals this season, 5 of which either were game winners or tied the score and took us into overtime where we had a chance to win. Dylan played all 4 years at Norman High. He played a variety of positions, and finally the coach figured it out that he was a forward, and that's where he played his senior year. Dylan will attend OU this fall. He will study entrepreneurship. He'll be a businessman and political science. He'll be a politician. Quinn Swatek, if you're going to win games, you need goal scorers, yes, but you also need someone who can not only deny the other team a chance to score, but can be a ball winner, and that was Quinn Swatek. For that reason, I would suggest Quinn was one of the top vote getters at the All-State meeting, and thus an impressive accomplishment. Quinn was also voted our team contributor by his teammates because of what he offered the team both on and off the field. Quinn will attend OU next year, major in biology, with a focus on pre-med. I'd like to thank TD, and in particular, Bo Manus, our site coordinator, who did an absolutely spectacular job and was so supportive of our program. And finally, our top 22 players on the boys program had a 3.82 grade point average. We had some smart young men. Okay. Thank you.
Jump in and get your picture. Good job, guys. Hey, thanks for coming. Appreciate the time. Good to see you. Yep. All right, last but not least, our Norman High boys head golf coach, Greg Grost.
Thank you, everyone. And following Coach Drummond, to Ryan Rayner, Norman North coach, and Norman North guys over here, congratulations on an amazing year. Winning 8 times and out of 10 starts is it's pretty special, and it doesn't happen very often. And I've been around this sport a long time, and it was as good as I've ever seen. So congratulations, you all. I'd like to recognize Carson Wright as a co-captain for the Norman High team this year. This is my second year coaching high school golf. I kind of came out of retirement from another job as a college coach, and I walked into a good situation with Carson. He bought in from day one and has gotten better every minute. He was co-captain this year, 4 times in the top 5, 8 times in the top 10. His worst finish was 16th. He averaged 74 for the year, finished 7th at state. But more importantly, 3.8 in GPA. But even more important than that, he's a class young man. He's going to go to Cameron next year on scholarship to play golf. In the world of transfer portal and everything, I have a feeling it probably won't be where he ends up when it's all said and done. Not because Cameron's not a great place, but I think he's got Division I gold, and if that happens, it'll be great. I also want to thank my 2 assistant coaches this year, Brent Hartzick, who is a full-time teacher at Norman High, who's been with me for 2 years. Brent's amazing, keeps me out of trouble, keeps Bo away from me so I screw it up, right? Yeah, it's good, yeah. And also Peyton Otto. Peyton is finishing up his degree at the University of Oklahoma, former Norman High golfer, and he also assisted. So he was All-State. He's been named All-State. And Carson, congratulations.
Appreciate you coming up. All right, one last thing, and I think it's sliding up there. Is that right, Kathy? Those two? Okay. Tonight was an example of the success that we had across the board with our spring sports. If everybody can see the flyer that's on the screen, and I'm sure everybody can, I do want to mention it because it does sound as good as it looks, and what a special year we had, and I labeled it as a year to remember because it is simply a year to remember for all of our programs at both high schools. 9 state champions, 8 state runner-ups, 4 national champions, 15 state tournament qualifiers, 7 regional champions, 70 all-conference selections, 30 all-state selections, and 43 scholarship athletes. So I think that deserves one more round of applause for a job well done across the board. And I'll finish with this. That kind of success is not possible without a group effort, and that group effort includes the support that we have from the Board of Education, understanding the value of extracurricular activities, the support from our district administration, Dr. Millerino, Mr. Milner, several folks across the tables here, our coaches that we have here, the parents, the students, and the community of Norman. And I can assure you from my side of it, the pride that I take when I tell people that I'm the district athletic director for Norman Public Schools, it has a special meaning because of all of that group that I just mentioned, and I say thank you from my side of it as well.
And TD, I'm going to add to that, a district athletic director who has a vision and will not take no for an answer. So really appreciate you and the work you've done because, yeah, all of that up there, parents, students, coaches, but you also have to have the leadership and the support you give them. So appreciate you every day.
Yep, thank you.
I agree. TD, we really do. I've shared this is fantastic, but it's like the Trey Young retirement. That was a class evening event. We have a OU baseball player going to the World Series, I believe, from Norman North, Cade Horton. So this is
Norman
just...
High, and if I can get Dr. Nick to give me Friday off, my boys and I are going up to Omaha. Hey, surely you guys can help me.
Cade's already texting me and telling me not to let you come.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you all very much for coming. We love it when it's all about our kids. All right.
Pete, can you, Dr. Leeson?
Hello? No.
It's not working.
Hello?
Oh, it's a test.
All right.
You guys hear that back there now?
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Okay.
Brittany's the test.
Next up is public communications. We welcome comment. However, it is necessary to limit public communication to 3 minutes per person. You will be given a 1-minute warning prior to the end of the 3-minute period. Board members cannot respond to questions or comments during public communication. So the first one we have up is Cynthia Rogers.
Good evening. Yay Sports. I don't know if you guys know, I was a Division I scholar athlete myself, so I know I had lots of opportunities that way. I had some questions. I know you can't answer during this portion, but these are actually on the consent items, so I hope somebody will ask the question so the public can get some further clarification. And this is under item H5, the operational services consent item. One is about the agreement with the SRO officer program, and I think it'd be useful for the public to understand how that's funded and how the cost sharing works between the city and I'm not really sure, I haven't caught up on the city's budget on how that's going to go this year. So I guess I'd like an update on if that's going to be the same number, increased, if the cost sharing is changed from what it's been before, and maybe what that cost sharing is. So that's your item. And then also, item number 8, H58, also under operational services, is about Sodexo management. And I know I hear lots and lots of feedback about disappointment with the cleanliness of the buildings, and particularly during COVID. And I know Sodexo is probably struggling with staff as much as everybody else. But I wonder, I haven't looked at the contract, I haven't asked for it, but I wonder what the performance standards are, and then what happens if the buildings aren't in fact being cleaned the way they're supposed to be under the contract. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Stephen Ellis.
I wanted to comment today on the Norman Public Schools policy manual and Norman Public Schools' failure to follow some of the policies contained therein. I gave 3 examples in an email that I sent to the superintendent and board in April, and haven't really heard back anything about that. So the first example was that the bylaws for the Board of Education in the policy manual suggested the Board of Education meeting is supposed to start at 7 rather than 6. You might think that's a relatively minor point, although I do think it matters for people getting here when they have an opportunity to get here after work. The second point had to do with the bylaws for the Board of Education in the policy manual, clearly stating that the public actually has 2 opportunities to address the board. One of them concerning items not on the agenda, and that's the one that's supposed to happen at the beginning. The second concerns agenda items which have not been presented at a previous meeting. That's during the new business section of the agenda. So there should be 2 opportunities for people to talk about the board, talk to the board. And then finally, the bylaws for the Board of Education contain a provision that says personnel matters will not be discussed at board meetings, but despite that, dismissal recommendations do list people's names, which seems inconsistent with that. All the board policies are, of course, subject to revisions by the board, but it's even in the policy that says the board is supposed to explicitly change the rules if they're going to be doing that. So they could either permanently change the rules through the adoption of new policies, or they can temporarily change the rules through appropriate parliamentary procedures. But I don't think the board should, and probably can't legally, really, just ignore its own standing rules. And in that regard, I want to remind the board that I currently have a pair of complaints pending pursuing the complaints policy in the manual, and there's a deadline for the first one of those that's actually on Friday. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have disposition of routine business.
I make a motion to accept the purchase orders and approve the consent docket items A through L as listed below and in the agenda.
Actually, I had a couple questions.
We have to make a motion first, Alex, and then we'll open it up.
Second. Yeah, so tonight was not the first time that I've actually heard that question about the cost sharing between the city and the SRO program. And I think I know the answer, but I don't want to speak, unless I'm absolutely sure. Does anyone want to chime in? Okay.
This is information that with a phone call can be given, and I think that's probably the appropriate place. I have no problem next board meeting. If we need to update publicly, that's great, but I don't want to address any public comment. Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy Nashert.
Yes.
Chad Weiss.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton. Alex Regiers.
Yes.
Thank you all. The next on the agenda is board's consideration and decision regarding appeal by Stephen Ellis, Dr. Stephen Ellis, of denial of his request of records. We're going to let Dr. Ellis have 5 minutes, and then if the superintendent wants to address the board for 5, then we will let both parties.
And as he's coming up, if we're not able to hear him, I've been assured that you can still hear out there and on the stream, so just letting everybody know.
If the board takes seriously the instructions that President Nashert sent in an email to all of us about this proceeding, namely that no additional material is to be presented by either side, then I think there's really no way for the board to uphold Superintendent Migliorino's decision to deny my open records request. The superintendent's denial was always premised on what are basically two false claims. The first of which was that FERPA rules make student records indivisible. So this was from the superintendent's note. It says, Ellis contends that records should be produced, but with certain parts redacted. He misunderstands that the entire documents are student records, and he noted in an email that the entire record is confidential. That turns out not to be true, as we'll see in a minute. The second point is that the Open Records Act, that's false, is that the Open Records Act allows a government entity to hide non-exempt information if it's mixed with some exempt information, which is why subsection 13 of the Open Records Act was noted. It's entitled confidentiality required by federal law, but it's not exactly what it says. So the superintendent seems to think that the ORA incorporates his view about FERPA standards into Oklahoma law, and that turns out not to be correct either. As early as May 9th, in an email, I pointed out that both of those positions are in error. Superintendent Migliorino hasn't addressed that point directly or indirectly in any of the materials that I've seen or you've seen that are relevant to that appeal. So in what follows, I'll review the evidence that I've already provided that the superintendent is just misinterpreting the law here. So under the explicit rules of this appeal, there doesn't seem to be any way for the superintendent to prevail. With regard to the first issue, it's very clear. FERPA specifically allows suitably redacted student educational records to be released. So I'm quoting here from the Code of Federal Regulations, the part that actually implements FERPA. And it says, an educational institution may release records without consent after the removal of all personally identifiable information. It just doesn't get any clearer than that. So that's a direct quote. It shows that educational records are not indivisible in federal law. On the second issue, the Open Records Act directly protects student privacy, so it doesn't really need to incorporate FERPA. But it also specifically recognizes and requires suitably redacted records to be released. So the main part of the Open Records Act is actually subparagraph number 5, and so this is a quote from the law there. Any reasonably segregable portion of a record containing exempt material shall be provided after deletion of exempt portions. So FERPA permits the kind of request that I'm making for material that's been redacted, but the ORA actually requires it. So even if they're educational materials, that doesn't mean that they're completely exempt from the Open Records Act. So the key issue here is really redaction, or what FERPA calls de-identification. I understand and accept that I may be given documents that are largely blacked out. That, however, is actually sufficient for my purposes, which are to determine whether or not MPS is actually implementing its own bullying policy. That's all I'm entitled to. That's all I want. But I think that I am, in fact, entitled to that by the law. So I hope that you will agree and decide to release the records suitably redacted, which is exactly how I asked for them. So for the next couple of, if anybody has any questions for me, I can take the remainder of my time
No,
for that.
we're not opening any questions up, and I thought I made that clear. If the board has any questions, it'll be directed to our attorney, Karen Long.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Yes, sir.
Madam President, members of the board, I appreciate the presentation that was just provided to the Board of Ed and the views shared. However, there's a lack of understanding. Oh, well, there you go. Views shared. However, there's a lack of understanding of the district's obligations when records are those of a student or multiple students and maintained by the district as student education records. I believe and support the law with respect to open records and foster that environment with our staff. However, I also recognize and enforce our legal and ethical obligations to students and parents to protect student records as confidential, except in instances where the law provides for their release. Dr. Ellis acknowledges the existence of FERPA, the Open Records Act, and its limitation on access to some records, but contends that FERPA only applies to records created under federal law, not records created pursuant to Oklahoma law. But he argues that even if FERPA is applicable, the penalty for producing the records is withholding of federal dollars. He urges the board to provide him the records and take its chances with the loss of federal monies. As to Oklahoma's law protecting the confidentiality of education records, Dr. Ellis contends that the law is permissive and the board should choose to make student education records available to him rather than treat them as confidential student records. Dr. Ellis also suggests that the records can be produced and confidential portions of the reports just simply redacted. In declining to produce the records of specific parent-student reports of bullying behavior, the records custodian relied on the following. The law clearly defines bullying. Oklahoma's Open Record Act provides public access to public records, but it identifies records that are not open to the public. Confidentiality is required by federal law, specifically. Records coming into the possession of a public body from the federal government or records generated or gathered because of federal legislation may be kept confidential to the extent required by federal law. Public education institutions have unique obligations with respect to student records, and Oklahoma law provides that public education institutions and their employees may keep confidential individual student records as well as personal communications concerning individual students. Moreover, federal legislation, FERPA, protects the privacy of student education records and applies to all schools that receive funds under an applicable program of the USDE. Apart from directory information, the district cannot release a student education record or parts of the student's record without parent consent. If a parent opts out of the release of directory information, that information also remains confidential except as to explicit exceptions in FERPA. Those exceptions involve releases to school officials with legitimate education interest, other schools to which a student is transferring, specified officials for audit or evaluation purposes, appropriate parties in connection with financial aid to students, organizations conducting certain studies for or on behalf of the school, accrediting organizations, to comply with judicial order or lawfully issued subpoena, appropriate officials in cases of health and safety emergencies, and state and local authorities with a juvenile system pursuant to specific state law. No exception is provided for a release of student education records based on a public records request. Finally, Dr. Ellis's position, if upheld, would open up a variety of records that are maintained as student education records, such as student discipline records, Title IX investigation reports, student IEPs, teacher evaluation documents, because he believes that every record is open and district personnel can simply redact documents. In this regard, he misperceives and misapplies authorities related to FERPA, the Open Records Act, and district policies. It would be unconscionable to release such records, even with redactions, and would open the district up to claims by parents, students, SDE, and the USDE. For the reasons stated, I ask that you deny the request for records. I've also have available here the document that was submitted to the board and Dr. Ellis with all its attachments.
Thank you. So do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve and uphold the superintendent's decision to deny records to Stephen Ellis on the basis of their identity as student education records.
Second?
Discussion? Questions to Attorney Karen Long? None, then, I'm sorry, I thought
I guess it's a question and a comment. Dr. Ellis said his main reason for the open records request was to see if we are following our bullying policy. What information can we give him to say and show and prove that we follow our bullying policy?
Well, I think what the law contemplates is that when you're looking at the bullying policy, it has not just a report of a particular incident, which is what belongs to the student and the parent. It also has a number of mechanisms to ensure that the district does take bullying seriously, follow up on reports of bullying, prepare appropriate reports. So if you look at the bullying policy, it mirrors the law, and you would ask if you were looking for how do we see that the board is following its policy. The forms that are completed, the training that is provided, the notice that is given to parents and students that is required by law. All of those are indications that the district is invested in meeting its legal obligations. It's only, however, the actual report of particular instances that concern the reporting student or students and the identification of a victim that are records that are identified as student education records that are not available absent parent consent.
Try it another way, because I don't want any student to ever have a question in their mind that they can report bullying because they're going to be afraid that some one word in a report somewhere is going to get out in the public and they're going to be identified and something else is going to happen to them. So that's where I stand on releasing any records to the public, trying to redact 90% of them. You don't know what one word someone will say, I know who said that. But at the same time, I want to make sure that the public knows that if we have a policy, that we're following the policy. So whatever information we can give Dr. Ellis or anyone else that requests that can prove that we followed our policy, then we need to try to do it. And if we can't answer that tonight, let's figure that out.
Well, and there's also reports that are made regarding the number of bullying incidents. Those reports are made not only to the State Department of Education, but they're made federally as well. So those are the built-in mechanisms to ensure that there's an incentive to take bullying seriously.
All right. Bearing no other questions, would the clerk please call the roll?
Cindy Nashert.
Yes.
Chad Weiss.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton.
Yes.
Alex Regiers.
No.
Motion carries. Appreciate everybody's time. Next on the agenda is the proposal for district insurance. Brenda Burkett, our infamous CFO.
Well, good evening. The topic and the agenda item that I'm getting ready to address is district insurance. I will remind the board, sorry?
Let me get this for you. If you want, or do you want us to?
I hadn't even thought about who was going to do the clicking. How about I do the clicking?
Got it.
And he's got amended budget up there, but the first item is district insurance, right? I believe so. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. I would remind the board that our options for specifically for property insurance in the state of Oklahoma for public schools is drastically reduced from when I started many years ago. We used to have lots of more national companies, more insurance markets that were providing districts with insurance coverage, and those have left the state mainly because of the wind and hail and tornado claims that we're so infamous for. So as we were approaching this year's insurance quote process, I got an email from my CFO group. It was probably the latter part of May, and one of my friends said, has anybody else seen their renewal quotes for property insurance? Ours went up over 60%. And then several of my other peers started chiming in, speaking to the fact that they too were hearing that their insurance premiums were going to be going up over 20 to 40%. I scheduled a meeting with Bank First, who was the broker company insurance agent that the board assigned to work on our insurance coverages for this year. And one of my peers said in the email, and I will even say to you tonight, that you know when your insurance agent wants to meet with you in person, that's probably a little bit concerning of what kind of information they're going to share. When Aaron Reinhardt with Bank First came to my office the 1st of June to share with me what we were being presented with a possible quote for the renewal of our property and liability coverage, he told me then that we were probably going to be in excess of 20% increase. It was about a $460,000 increase over last year's premium. But he cautioned me and said the disclaimer is he was still working the markets, that the carriers have really been pulling back and really looking at deductibles. They've been looking at values. They've been looking at underwriting issues. And so he told me that the premium, that Bank First was still working to see if there were other options and to get those carriers to sharpen their pencils. So what we ended up with still is an increase in our premium, but I'm very pleased to announce and say that our overall insurance premium, workers' comp, property, and liability went up overall only 4.76%. Our property insurance ended up coming in just at about 11%. So it did come in much more favorably for our district than when I first sat down with Aaron and Danny. I think many districts in the state of Oklahoma experiencing these ungodly increases are really going to be struggling to continue past this year. I know many districts with their federal COVID funds and ESSER funds and the flexibility that are provided there, I think some are able to accept some of the insurance increases that we're seeing. But I do know that my opinion, as I present these numbers, it's just an unsustainable trend to see what we're looking at. With that lead-in, I will tell you that we were able, Aaron and Danny and his team were able to bring down that insurance quote in a couple of areas, actually not so much in the property as in the liability and workers' comp. I'll start out by sharing with you that our workers' comp, we've been a member of a group called OSAG, Oklahoma School Assurance Group. They have consistently offered workers' comp premiums for our school district several $100,000 less than what some of the other work comp carriers were able to offer. When I first received our OSAG renewal, it was for an increase of $130,000. As Aaron and Danny and Bank First Services continue to work for us, they came across a new to me casualty insurance company called LUBA, L-U-B-A. They've been providing regional workers' comp coverage and are working their way now into the state of Oklahoma. They gave me a couple of districts' names to contact, and I got a really good reference check and did my research, and pleased to see that the workers' comp premium I'll be presenting to you tonight as part of our package is with LUBA. It is that $130,000 less than what we were going to see with OSAG. On the liability lines, Liberty Mutual had been providing our various liability lines this past year, as we worked to see what other options there might be. We just finished up, really, literally as of this week, last week, in finalizing a liability quote set of coverages mainly with OSIG, Oklahoma School Insurance Group, another one of the collective group insurance pools that there is in the state. OSIG will not or has not quoted our district with property insurance, but did come to the table with liability coverage for our district that was less than $55,000, was $55,000 less than Liberty Mutual. So I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, but telling you that because there's such volatility in the market, it really does take a lot of effort, and with our property coverage, it even is with a layered program where insurance carriers aren't that interested in taking on the whole possible casualty loss that comes with a district. There are layers, if you will, that are purchased, and so with that proposal, we were able to bring that, the liability, the workers' comp, all in within, as I mentioned earlier, a 4.76% increase over our premium cost for last year. I think I've covered all of my notes. I will tell you at the bottom of the document that I shared in board backup, you will see that we had a few other indications of quotes for workers' comp, all several $100,000 more than what we accepted. And then with property, we had declined to quote, pricing indication was high. As I mentioned before, OSIG would not quote property, only the liability lines. So it's not like we just took one carrier and accepted it, really working to see what our options are, but they are very limited. And I'm satisfied that we really did beat the bushes with Bank First Services trying to help us out with that and presenting as small of an increase to the property and liability coverage. It's much smaller than what I had first anticipated.
Well, and Brenda, I want to jump in. Thanks, Bank First. Thanks for all the work that you guys have done. But I also know Brenda holds you accountable. And I want you to know the board holds us accountable. Over the last few years, they have really challenged us to make sure we get out there and beat the bushes. And no one better than Brenda, because she doesn't take the first request, right? She provides opportunities for you to succeed with her. So really appreciate the work you've put into this. And yeah, it's not great, but keep sharpening the pencil, but it's much better than it could have been.
So the 4.76%.
Motion to approve the premium amounts for the district's insurance as presented.
Second. Madam Chair, may I ask my question now?
Does anybody want to ask a question now?
Yes, please. Does the 4.76%, is that the $130,718?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I just want to say that you've done a great job, because we've watched insurances skyrocket over the last couple of years. So 4.76% is unbelievable. So thank you to Bank First. Thank you for what your work's doing, because it makes $130,000 a lot of money, but it could have been much, much worse than that. So great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have to give Brenda credit for watching this money as though it were her grocery budget or something. I mean, she takes it personally, and she works to protect the bottom lines all the time.
So before I give you my 2 cents, yes, thank you, Brenda. We need to understand here, though, this increase, not too bad, but what happens is our valuations of our building goes up, i.e. our deductible goes up. So we are in the hole more, or needing more reserves, because, again, we've asked her to put this money aside in the event of something that happened April 28th or October 11th of last year. So I'm very frustrated in that respect, and my conversation with Brenda was, our budget was flat last year. We got nothing else. And yet, we're supposed to look at gasoline, insurance, deductibles for this. It's very frustrating to me when we've got a whatever great rainy day fund, and our per student dollar keeps going down, and our expenses keep going up. And I said, it's time to have a roundtable. These superintendents, like you said, Brenda, are absolutely, theirs has gone way up. What has to happen before, or what can happen before something changes? So I let her know I was extremely frustrated. But again, you're right, Dirk, this isn't as bad as it could be.
And I will add to that, yeah, it is a serious and ongoing conversation with the superintendents, and especially the consortium that I'm a part of as, leader of District 7 superintendents in the state. It's a hot topic, and there's going to have to be competition one way or another, and God knows we don't want things legislated, but sometimes it has to be done that way. So any support we can get, because when revenue's going down and expenses are going up, that's not a successful formula.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Now we get to vote. Kathy, would you call roll?
Cindy Nashard.
Yes.
Chad Weiss.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton.
Yes.
Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
Now, my next item is the 21-22 amended budget. I will remind the board that the Norman Public Schools does operate under the School District Budget Act provisions. And even though we've had lots of communication during the year, certainly since I last presented the last, quote, official School District Budget Act document to you in December, tonight is part of the process where we must first look at our amended budget before we present the proposed budget for next year. So tonight's update, my disclaimer is that as we look at these numbers, they are still projections. It's June 13th, and not only are we not finished with our June 30th year, but we still have revenues and expenditures that actually continue to come into the office in the summer months that we review and make sure that we're getting things charged to the correct year. So in your backup tonight is the actual School District Budget Act format itself. I will remind you that that format shows you the 2 previous fiscal years' actual numbers. The third column in that format is how I last presented the budget to you, and that was on December 6th of 21. And then the fourth column in your backup document are the numbers for tonight's presentation. And then, as I usually do, I put all that information into a PowerPoint just to summarize it and help try to show it in a little easier format. Before I get into the presentation, I want to stop and give kudos to a couple of people in the audience. Matt Genhardt is the Director of Finance for our school district, just joined us in April and hit the door running, along with Gayla Mears, who took on federal programs last year, and little did she know what federal programs was going to turn into in the next 12 months. Part of my presentation tonight will talk about those federal funds, but I really want to give these two a specific shout out. Gosh, I'd have to sit here and, there's so many people that with these federal dollars that provided opportunities for our district in certain areas that there's been different administrators that have stepped up with the different opportunities and the allocations that have been provided to facilitate and help us budget for these funds and spend them. So I want to thank Matt and Gayla as I get started on my presentation. So the first slide is the summary of appropriated funds for this 21-22 school year. You'll see listed the general fund, building fund, child nutrition fund, and sinking fund. And the format of this slide, I want to point out to you that it shows the beginning fund balance, which was the ending fund balance for last year. So you take that beginning fund balance plus the revenues for this year, and that shows us what total of that, how much is totally available, get it out of my mouth in a minute, for that particular fund. And then you'll see the expenditures forecasted and projected for this school year to get us down then to what I think is the projected fund balance, these funds for this year. Just at a glance, you'll see the general fund, I show a slight decrease. In the building fund, you'll see an increase listed from the beginning of 16.86% up to 27.93. And am I still okay? I kind of hear myself. Just got to keep going? Okay. Okay. Child Nutrition Fund, you'll see has a slight decrease in that percentage of fund balance, and then the sinking fund. So I'm going to actually work backwards on this slide and then go into some future slides with some details. I want to start with the sinking fund. I don't have a lot of detail to share on a separate slide, so I want to start here and just point out to you that, and remind you, that the sinking fund is the fund that we receive ad valorem property payments in from the patrons to help us make our principal and interest payments each year from our past bond elections. When we pass a bond issue, those bond funds come into the bond fund for us to do all the capital expenditures with. But kind of with any loan, you've got to pay back principal and interest, and that's where the sinking fund comes in. So you can see there that we've listed approximately $31 million for ad valorem property tax money coming into the sinking fund, and our projected expenditures for this year just over $30.5 million. And you may say, well, why aren't those equal? Why is there such a large beginning fund balance? And it all has to do with the forecasted ad valorem property tax payments the next year. We have a very large principal payment that's going to be due in next March, for example. People are allowed to pay their property taxes half by December, the final half by the end of March 31st. So we can't have a zero fund balance and expect that all the payments are going to come in time for us to make a payment, that March 1st payment, when there's still so much property tax money still to be collected. So I know sometimes that's a question that I've been asked. Some of you have asked me about the, quote, large fund balance, and it's looking at the timing of when those payments are and when people are making their tax payments. You'll also see that I don't have a percentage for fund balance. Even though there is a fund balance, there's no statutory limitations. There's not a dollar amount or percentage that we're working on, so I don't have that listed there. But now I'd like to move across my page to the Child Nutrition Fund and point out to you that, and remind you that the Child Nutrition Fund is obviously the monies that we use to operate our nutrition program for our kiddos. Last year, FY21, and this year, FY22, we have been able to provide free lunch and breakfast to our students because of federal dollars coming through, part of our COVID, part of the federal government's reaction and response to the COVID. So I want to point that out and tell you that one other thing that comes into play with the Child Nutrition Fund is the State Department has requirements that you cannot carry over an excess of child nutrition funds. As they looked at our fund balance for FY21, which was the large 1.8 million or 35%, they looked at that and told us and many other districts across the state that our carryovers needed to be spent down. Many of us experienced larger growths in our fund balance in child nutrition because the federal government reimburses at a higher rate for free reduced students for free meals than they do at a paid rate. So we really had large federal reimbursement dollars coming in because we were serving so many lunches and breakfasts. So to give you a frame of reference, that 7.3 million revenue, typically the Child Nutrition Fund runs closer to about 5 million. So as we started receiving free lunch and breakfast in 21 and then had full-on free lunch and breakfast in 22, you can really see that that revenue has grown this year. And that's part of the reason for the State Department reaching out and saying, you need to spend down your carryovers. It must be on child nutrition-related expenditures. So we worked with Sodexo and Justin and Mark Coulter in that area, and we looked at what are our needs in the child nutrition program. And we ordered some equipment, a van, we ordered some point-of-sale terminals for our child nutrition serving lines. So investing back into the program and spending down that carryover are good problems to have, right? So we do still show a pretty large and even a growth in our fund balance this year up to that 2.1 million, 29%. So I am sure that we will, as we finalize our numbers, that we will probably be sending another spending plan up to the State Department this next year, letting them know how we're spending those funds down. But you'll see when I get to my FY23 budget, I will say now that free lunch and breakfast is ending for next school year. So we'll see revenues and expenditures coming down probably, well, you will, as you see my presentation for next year. Let's see, I think that's all I was going to say on child nutrition. Building fund is the next fund that I will speak to. A reminder that the revenues for the building fund come from, again, property taxes, only 5 mils, so a much smaller percentage of our property taxes go into this fund. We did see our fund balance in the building fund drop last year. So you see that beginning line, 947,000 fund balance at only a 16.86% fund balance. I'll remind you that we spent down the building fund last year as we were leveraging those dollars for legal expenditures that we could pay out of the building fund. That's nothing new for me. Cycles of funding for school districts come up, they ebb and flow, and as the building fund is able to grow and absorb some of our general fund expenses, I will move those over, help with the struggling general fund, and then often need to move those expenses back. So what we're seeing here is where we were intentional in trying to build up our fund balance. So with our revenues exceeding our expenditures by, at the time of this presentation, 693,000, we're growing our building fund balance. Some of the expenditures that we were able to actually move back to the general fund this year, we put a portion of our utilities back into the general fund, a portion of our custodial contract, because those are examples of expenditures that we could spend with our ESSER funds, those federal dollars that we were receiving. So that helped reduce some of the expenditures in the building fund, which will grow it, and again, help us work with that and the leveraging. Now, as I approach the general fund, I put this slide in here as a reminder to all of us and to myself of the different federal-related COVID response federal dollars that were made available to our district, starting at the end of '21 and through this FY22. You can see that the total allocation of those different funds that are listed there, just under $30 million. The acronyms, I've reminded all of us there what ARP and CARES and ESSER stand for. Each one of these, and some of them you can just look at the title and know what its intent is for. For example, the Counselor Corps Grant, the $128,000, that is specifically for counseling services from this federal grant. Some of these funds were more discretionary in nature, all of them to prepare, prevent, and respond to COVID. You'll see in FY22 budget, the portion of this nearly $30 million that was budgeted this school year, almost $10 million of it. Some of these listed here, the funds end this June 30th. A couple of them end next year, and the largest one you see there, the 0795 ESSER fund, that the allocation just over $18 million, it ends in FY24. So as we talk about any of our budgets and we talk about state funding and federal funding, all of us have had to be really cognizant of the fact that this is one-time money. We can use it and did use much of this in a true reaction to COVID, whether it was PPE, air purifiers, additional cleaning of our buildings, masks, I think I've said, remote learning. We did have additional expenditures, no doubt about it, that we would never have dreamed of that were built into the FY22 budget, and we've used much of the COVID money for that. But then some of the money is available to us for necessary expenditures to maintain operations as we respond and prevent, respond, and respond to the COVID. Ooh, I can't get all those out of my mouth very well. So with this said, I wanted to show you what some of the major revenue adjustments and expenditure adjustments were in the general fund for this year. not only did we get some of those notices at the end of FY '21 and at the beginning of FY '22, but some of those monies also came to us during the course of this year. So revenue change, I actually I budgeted an additional $2 million in the general fund this year because of some of those additional federal stimulus allocations. The state aid allocation and adjustments went up since I last presented this budget to you in December. I'll remind you that going into this year, the State Department withheld 2% of the state aid formula dollars, not being sure what this year would look like. So we actually had a large $1 million growth in our January state aid because they saw some of the weighted ADM, how many students were actually being funded in the formula, go down, as well as having that 2% that they held back. So my state aid and adjustments is that we did see a nice bump with our December, January state aid allocation. Also, there was another $115,000 that came to our district as a result of the charter school value penalty that was assessed to EPIC. And so those monies came back through the formula. Half of the EPIC penalty was being run through this state aid formula. The other half of it's being run through next year. So we'll see some more of that increase coming our way next year. How much the actual amount is will yet to be determined. But we did see an increase in our state aid allocations for those reasons this year. I've mentioned to you before that I'm very conservative on my revenues. Even though we have a history of collecting ad valorem at 98%, I always budget at a lesser amount until those collections actually are coming in, and we're at that 98% now. So that was an increase to the ad valorem revenue budget. County mortgage tax has come in $300,000 higher than my early projections. And then usually each mid-year, we get an allocation notice for our National Board Certified Teachers. On the expenditure side, again, added to the expenditure budget with those ESSER COVID funds. We expanded our Expand Ed program this year and had additional increases on the expenditure side for our online program. Transportation and maintenance, we've all known it personally and certainly have seen it where supply chains, rising prices, fuel prices, we have seen some increases in those areas of our budget as the departments have been trying to meet the needs and pay for the higher costs that they're seeing in those areas. And then, of course, you see the National Board Certified bonus. So putting all that together, you can see that we started this year at an 8.24% fund balance. As of this presentation, I'm showing the expense budget still exceeding the revenue budget by almost $300,000, which would bring us down to that 7.25% fund balance. It's mid-June. We still have a couple of months of wrapping up our fiscal year end. I'm anticipating that this drop in fund balance is going to flatten out and turn around to be a positive. But time will tell as we finish out the year and see how our revenues come in. Our strategic plan always looks at the health of our school district, and we do have a 9% fund balance in our strategic plan as one of our goals. You can see we're not there. I'm hoping that as this budget picture improves, that we'll see it increase. Don't know that we're going to get to that 9%. I don't know if it'll be that great. But we are still always looking at how we can finalize the year and be at a good place as we're working towards our negotiations in the start of the next school year. That is my last slide for this item. Do I have any questions?
Make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 amended budget.
Second.
Questions? Remind us, Brenda, what do you like the building fund balance percentage to be? Because you said it dropped real low, but I'm sorry if you told us.
No,
I
that's
didn't.
okay. We in our board policy, in our fiscal management policy, we have it set at 35%. So I typically am more comfortable with it being in that 25 to 35% range. But it's not anything that, I mean, there's no penalty. It's just, again, managing those revenues and those expenditures. So we can allow it to get small like it did this last year, but it's important to know that some of those expenditures can't stay in the building fund because it's so limited in its revenue.
All right, if the clerk will call the roll.
Cindy Neshert.
Yes.
Chad Weiss.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton.
Yes.
Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
All right, now we go to your public hearing, correct?
Correct. So again, School District Budget Act requires that the budget for the ensuing year be approved by the board before the end of June, by July 1st. It does allow for public hearing. So what I have for tonight's presentation will again be the appropriated funds with this proposed budget. It will not have the sinking fund in it this evening because we are allowed to wait for those assessed valuation information to come in from the assessor's office. That's usually in August. So it will be included when I present with you an amended budget for 22-23. You'll usually see me come back to you with an amended budget with a couple of things. We will have finalized this year's numbers, which I've said many times are still work in progress. We will receive our state aid allocation, usually in July. So I'll have that additional information. And then, as I mentioned, the assessed valuation, which drives that property value and local property tax money in the budget. Tonight's numbers will continue to be updated as we finish up FY22 and as we get more of that information for 23. So my first slide, again, is the summary of the appropriated funds, the general fund, building fund, and child nutrition. These starting numbers, you'll recognize them as the ending numbers from the 21-22. So if and when those ending numbers change, then of course that rolls forward and gives us a different starting point as we approach the 22-23 budget. I'm actually going to, this time, work across on the details, starting with the general fund. Some of the major adjustments that I'm anticipating as we work towards preparing the budget and planning for next year. One large deduct and drop on this slide you'll see stands out, and that is the fact that our weighted average daily membership, our weighted ADM, is smaller this year than it was last year. We are only being paid, there was some legislation that came out last year that changed, a district can no longer go back 2 years and use the highest of the 2 years. As we approach this next year, basically our weighted ADM this year is what we start with. When they look at reallocating next year is when they'll look at our first 9 weeks numbers next year and determine if we're growing, if we're higher there. But when they're looking at their state aid allocations for this summer, they're going to be looking statewide at what everybody's weighted ADM is this year. And everybody's down. Many are gaining back students from 2021 when we all lost so many students. Give you some numbers for our district. We lost about 1,800 students last year, and we've gotten, I think we're about 600 to 800 down, somewhere in that range. So we're not completely back to where we were. We made a big increase back, but we're still not where we were pre-pandemic. So the first large negative that you see on the revenue projections is the drop in our weighted ADM times what they're currently paying all schools for on a per student basis. That drop in our weighted ADM is calculated out to be almost a $5 million drop in state aid. But the good news is that because the formula is driven by total weighted average daily membership, at a statewide level, we are all down tremendously in weighted ADM. There is no new money going into the formula next year, but when you have this much money and there's less hands, if you will, being fed, then that amount per student's going to go up. We still don't have the exact number. Everybody's working on what they know for information that's being provided, But based on what I've heard so far, I've thrown in an estimated increase, which calculates out to about 4.1 million. So if those two numbers hold, you can see we're still behind when it comes to state aid. But again, that's one of those pieces of information that once we receive it in July, I'll be able to work it in with those actual numbers into the budget. ESSER funds budgeted another 3.3 million of our federal funds going into this year's budget. One thing, do remember if you remember the slide in my last presentation, that 18 million, and we only had budgeted approximately 4 million of that. We've got to spend those ESSER funds over the next 2 years. So you're seeing the fact that not only are we spending the amount that we had last year, but on top of that is another 3.3 million on this revenue side. And of course, you'll see it here in a moment on the expenditure side. Saw an increase in our county. I always anticipate an increase in our county 4 mil. Historically, we gain 100,000 plus each year, so I always feel comfortable in putting that into my projections. And then we have an Oklahoma Aviation Academy grant monies that we are budgeting in for next year. On the expenditure side, again, the ESSER funds are in the budget. We've got additional FTE and staff compensation in right now at about 3 million. This is reflective of us still wanting and needing to invest in our teachers and in our classrooms. Recruit and retain are two R words that have really become part of our vocabulary these last couple of years. And so this addition to our budget as well, we'll be working through that this summer and with the board, but knowing that it's our intent to try to still continue to invest in our classrooms. The OA grant, we saw the revenue, we're seeing the expenditure on this side. And then a couple of drops in expenditures. We made a final Apple payment this year of almost $2.9 million out of our general fund. It was the final payment in our Apple deployment and our plan for those. So that won't be in the budget this next year. And then we had an insurance payment that we made at the beginning of this year that won't be repeated in FY23. It was $181,000. So putting those big ticket items, if you will, into the budget, you can see that the starting point is my projection for last year, which is the 9.8 million or 7.25%. At the time of building this budget, I'm showing the expenditure budget in excess of the revenue budget by about 770,000, bringing that fund balance projection down to 6.55. I've got building fund revenue and expense listed on one slide here for your information. Ad valorem, I've put in an estimated increase to our assessed valuation of about 3%. Last year, it was a 3% number. The year before, it was slightly higher. A couple of years, it was lower. So again, that's one of those estimates that we'll see whenever the valuation information comes in August. On the expenditure side for the building fund, you'll see that a portion of our Sodexo custodial increase is budgeted in the building fund, and then the district insurance increase that we talked about is in the building fund. What does that look like then for proposed? You can see that the 27.93% is dropping some down to that 23.8%. I'll repeat myself. If and when the ending, that projected beginning fund balance changes, that'll change all of these. But again, trying to leverage the building fund, leverage the ESSER dollars. That's why Matt and Gayla have been my best friends this year. And then finally, the child nutrition fund, you can see the ending projected of 29%. And even though you see a excess expense over revenue, it brings that fund balance down. But notice that the percentage went up. That's because the revenue went down. I'll remind you that at FY22, we talked about the revenue had gone up to about 7 million with all that federal reimbursement. In FY23, we will have students being fed free based on their free and reduced applications. So the revenue is projected to go down. Still looking at expenditures, again, that reinvesting of our excess carryover, so that even though we are spending a little more than is projected to come in, there's a growth in the fund balance because of that revenue figure dropping. And I think that is my last slide for this presentation.
Make a motion to,
I I'm sorry, Chad, it looks like we're supposed to go to comments and questions by superintendent and board members next for the agenda, so I apologize. It looks like we do the action at the very end. Any board members? You thinking, Linda? I guess I think it's important that we talk about the $600,000 increase to Sodexo. I think we do need to address that, if you don't mind.
I'll be happy to. Sodexo has been struggling filling positions, as lots of businesses have been doing. So as they were working with Mr. Milner on the proposal for next year, they presented Justin with an option. We've had a fixed contract with Sodexo Custodial, meaning we've had an agreed-to amount at the beginning of the year. It's been divided by 12 months and paid out to Sodexo. The cost proposal that they presented Mr. Milner with for this next school year is changing it from a fixed contract to a cost reimbursable contract. And that would mean that we would be billed by Sodexo each month for their actual expenses incurred. So the difference that we're seeing there is if and when there are custodian positions that go unfilled, we will only be billed by Sodexo for the actual cost to be reimbursed for that. We don't want to just end it at that, though. We need our positions to be filled. We want that staffing to be complete. But when we have businesses that they can easily go to work for and make several dollars plus more, part of this cost reimbursable proposal that the board looked at and approved this evening is an agreement on our part with Sodexo to raise the hourly rate and to provide a merit increase for employees. Again, trying to recruit and retain those employees for Sodexo that work in our buildings. So the anticipated increase of that raise in wages and that merit increase, along with the cost of providing services and purchasing supplies, et cetera, we have it budgeted in at a higher amount than last year, and we're paying a portion of that from the building fund. Some of the custodial contract is for our nutrition program. They clean the kitchens and the cafeterias, and so some of the increase I have budgeted into the child nutrition fund where that's applicable. And there was a little bit that I put into the general fund because of some ESSER dollars. So that's why it's actually kind of spread between three funds, and that is the explanation for the increase.
And I'm going to add a little bit to that and a little bit of real talk. And Mr. Benda's in the back of the room. You can wave and say hello. He's at most all of them. And he is our direct point person for Sodexo Custodial and has been for many years, and appreciate him and everything he has done. But the fact of the matter is I'm tired of receiving emails about soap. I'm tired of receiving emails about classrooms not being cleaned. And I'm just, there's no exception for that. The fact of the matter that everybody's having an employment issue, everybody's having trouble finding people, but at the end of the day, we still got to get the stuff done. And the people who are working for Sodexo right now, I will say, are working their tails off. They are across the board, but it is a people issue. But with that said, mid-year, and Kevin and Sodexo know this, we've been very straightforward. If it doesn't change, we got to look at a different solution. And, we're real serious about that. So, and I know you guys are as well, because I'm tired of having those conversations with you as well about things. So, and I know it probably goes this way too. But no excuses at all, other than we just got to get it done. And I appreciate Sodexo and Justin working through this, because Justin asked them to give us options. Something to look at. Can't do the same thing over and over, which I will say for decades, a couple of decades, it's been really good, and I appreciate that and respect that, and that's why we're doing this one more time to see if we can get it right. But just real talk, not going to go through another year of hearing from people about trash cans and soap.
And remind me, I think we're 22 positions short, if I recall. That's kind of where we were looking at. Not that many?
Yes, it was up and down. It's probably between 15 and 20.
Yeah, so that's a lot. I mean, and hopefully this will help with the minimal increase, but hopefully it will help, so. All right, now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I understand that to get more people to apply for jobs, one has to pay more for the jobs. That makes perfect sense. However, I also realize that Sodexo is a for-profit corporation, while we are not. And I want to know how one applies the fine-tooth comb to be sure that they are passing through only legitimate and honest increases. Large corporations just don't have a good reputation for honesty and integrity. And I don't know how one applies that fine-tooth comb, but could you tell me?
I will tell you that because this is a change, I've reached out to the Sodexo district manager and quizzed him about the details of the monthly invoices, and moving into the year, he assured me that they will be happy to meet with me and share any kind of details and answer any kind of questions. So I can assure you that between Mr. Milner and I, we will be looking at those details and analyzing them, not just signing off and saying, oh, this is our monthly charge for September.
Also, Ms. Sexton, we're able to see a breakdown of the cost as to, we're talking about the starting salary or hourly rate for Sodexo custodian would be $10.60. I think if you look across the market, that's woefully under the market value. And so before Ms. Burkett and I were able to bring that to your attention, or bring this forward, this motion, we were able to take a look at that. We were able to see a breakdown of the cost to see where the funds were going as it relates to salaries, managerial fees, and those kinds of things.
Is the additional $600,000 that's listed in the budget just a math problem that is the hour increase, the percentage increase, both those two increases times the total number of Sodexo employees in custodial services?
It's the additional positions, it's the raises for everyone, and it is supposed to be the current cost for providing the non-salary portion of the service agreement. So.
Hang on just a second. Okay. So the $600,000 is a math problem that you can see transparently, I'm assuming. Is that correct? Linda was asking a question. How do we know that the money we're giving them is being spent to where it should be spent? And that $600,000 is all exactly the increase that we're agreeing to. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
The question is, maybe they don't spend the whole $600,000, but did they spend whatever increase there is where we authorized them to do so? I trust you.
I imagine that's going to come out in a few Benda and Milner meetings as they're talking about why something is or why something looks great or why something doesn't. And then what was my other point I was going to make? Maybe it was going to piggyback on Dirk's comment, and that is that we went into this with, yes, this $600,000 is the budgeted amount kind of at the high end. That would be assuming all the positions are full and everybody's paid and jobs getting done.
And I will just add, outside an audit of their books, I guess we couldn't know that. But when entering into a relationship with a company, we look for upstanding companies. And they understand, as Dr. Nick pointed out, that their account here in Norman Post Schools is really in front of them and has a chance of not being renewed for next year. So you've made the investment potentially here, or you did in your earlier action. And so it's going to be incumbent upon this company to show us a response. And so if they don't, as Dr. Nick mentioned, as we shared with Sodexo Corporation, then we'll go out for an RFP and determine, is Sodexo, in fact, is the best company for Norman Public Schools as it relates to custodial services or not. Again, outside an audit of their books, we can only speak to what they have presented to us. We feel good about the information they shared with us and the reason why we brought that forward to the board for action.
I just want to see part of that allocation go to soap dispensers, because I'm not joking. I'm saying, I don't know what it takes, but when you hear at graduation a senior class bring up that there's no soap in the bathrooms, a basic hygiene issue, that needs to change. That's disgusting. And I've witnessed it, we've all witnessed it. It's not hard to keep a bag of liquid soap in a bathroom. So if you've got to put up 25 dispensers and put padlocks on them, so there's soap in there, no one can take them out or what's going on, but that should not be a difficult issue. And we've been facing that issue for a while now. So I'm just saying, I like Sodexo, they've done a great job, but that is a big fail that's got to be fixed. And it shouldn't be an expensive fix to make sure there is soap in bathrooms. One last comment that I have. I know these are your most conservative, but when I see 6.55, that makes me really, really nervous. So let's, we've got a lot of work to do. And if it, I know we see this monthly, but if it goes the other way, we don't have much leash there. So things are going to be tight, especially without any more money coming from the state.
Well, and one thing, we need to keep in mind, Justin, you'll know if these positions are filled or not. You're going to be very on top of that, and it's a reimbursable contract, so we will only be paying for the positions filled.
Correct.
So they're not going to be billing us for positions are vacant.
We believe this is a model contract that allows for them to be incentivized, to make sure that everybody is working towards filling these positions. We know when we've seen those positions filled, 5 or less vacancies, the performance is significantly improved. So what we have seen this year is unacceptable. I think we all understand that, hence the reason that we've expressed your concerns and our concerns as well to Sodexo, and we are going into this year with a increase, but yet a model contract that will allow for us to hold the accountability to what we're receiving, and if we don't, then going out for an evaluation and determining a new account.
Right. It would be good to see at some point, because sometimes you go out for an RFP and you think you're going to do a whole lot better and you may not. $10 and something an hour, and I know that's before the increases that we're going to be giving, but it's a market study needs to be done. I'd like to see one of where we're going to be, because we may look at it, and that's what makes me nervous about this 6.55%. To meet the standard we want in our schools, we may need to be paying more than that $600,000, and that's just right now. Average wages of hourly employees has gone up 18 to 29%. That's not covering that pace. And so we may look at this and still go backwards. So that's just something we've got to continue to look at the numbers and see where we have to be.
Absolutely, and in every area that we employ people, because it's the same scenario in every single position.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that too when Brenda was telling us this, is this even going to make a difference or not? And that's the frustrating thing, is we have no idea. So are we all good? Alex, you're good.
I was also a little bit curious. So we're putting in this money to help, at least in part, increase the pay rate for the staff. Is Sodexo also putting forward some of their profit to help increase the pay? Or is that just on us?
I will say historically, Sodexo has taken significant cuts, $250,000 plus annually, and they do pony up from that side. I think right now, we just got to get some proof in the buildings and see it happening, see the action. But, and that's that, there's something to say for working with someone, that historical piece, working with people for a period of time. But at some point, there has to be a line drawn, and that's where we are. So, yeah, they have stepped up. They have stepped up when we've increased square footage significantly across the district and either held flat or gone backwards. But I think we're in a place where we've caught up, and now we got to see it.
And I will say, just to add on to what Dr. Nick mentioned, again, and to be clear for those listening, this is not always just about monetary. We've spent most of this year working through climate and culture with Sodexo Corporate. They brought in different individuals to look at ways to retain, improve, build a climate and culture, to ensure that we've done everything in the non-monetary category. Then that's where we've yielded the results we've gotten. That's why we're coming back to you for this increase. I will tell you, as it relates, there is that management fee there that they have had a reduced management fee. So again, I think it is a little bit below market as it relates to that. And we're not starting at the top by any means. So we'll be able to evaluate to determine whether they perform over the course of this year.
All right, thank you all. Next will be, can receive public hearing comments. These comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person if there are any. Yes, Dr. Ellis.
You want me to do it from here?
I would say if you want to go up there, that'd be great.
Yeah, I had two questions, really. The first was about the projected increase in the 4 mil revenue. And I was sort of one of the main economic trends in central Oklahoma right now is greater property values, which should be generating more money. So I was wondering whether or not we're just projecting past trends further or trying to take that into account. And maybe it doesn't matter. If I remember correctly, that influences the state aid number as well. So I was just wondering if you could discuss that issue. And then the second question that I was going to ask is just where the SRO program is in the budget that was presented. Because, I mean, I don't know if you've heard it or not, but my understanding is that the city's Public Safety Sales Tax Oversight Committee is going to be proposing to the city that Norman Police Department cooperate with NPS to hire, I think it was 4 new SROs. And I was wondering whether or not the budget as it sits right now reflects that proposed increase or not. Thanks.
I think there are questions you can answer.
I'm able to answer both of those questions, so I'll go ahead and So I'm okay to respond. So yes, Dr. Ellis, I put in the estimated 3%, but it's a wash almost in general fund, because whatever increase that is going to be a deduct in the state aid. So if it's, to your point, if the valuations and if the property tax is higher, then it'll be a larger deduct in our state aid formula. And the SROs are budgeted in the building fund, and I have not yet put any kind of a change in that figure. I'm waiting to hear more about that.
I want to add just a little bit of.
Well, after she answered that, I was going to then see if there are any other people that would like to comment. So no, we're good? All right, so go ahead, Dirk.
Just want to add a little flavor to that. Due to the equalization of the funding for the state, our property values in our district could double. But if they doubled, we would send that extra value back to the state and keep the small portion that we would retain that would be equalized across the entire state. And it's, I struggle. I am very much for the equalization, but I don't see students in small districts getting the same education that they get here. So I think if we're going to send $40 million into the state every year, that there should be a higher standard placed upon some of the 90 dependent school districts and such. So sorry for the commentary, but that's a comment about the budget.
All right, now, Chad, I think we're ready.
Make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 proposed budget.
Second.
Kathy, call the roll.
Cindy Nesher?
Yes.
Chad Weiss?
Yes.
Dirk O'Hare?
Yes.
Linda Sexton?
Yes.
Alex Regiers?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for all that good information. Next is new business. Do we have any?
No new business.
Then administrative staff reports next.
Yeah, just briefly, one, it was so nice to see all the athletes in here today, but the student athletes that we were able to recognize, finishing up a year finally without disruption, being able to recognize all those students. Once again, just as a reminder, the reason we had to bring that group in a little bit later is because they don't finish until last. So we wanted to make sure that we did get to recognize them. But with that said, we're full into summer now, and summer does not mean break. For us sitting in this room, summer work is going on. We have summer school, credit recovery, credit retention, credit advancement, remediation, summer camps, ESY, and the list goes on and on. We have great enrollment in all of them. If you want to know numbers at any point in time, we can get those for you, but they are all started up, and great reports coming back from everyone. Once again, the biggest challenge we have had, though, is staffing. Staffing. It's, whether it's people just want time off and they don't want to work, or it's a salary issue. If they don't pay enough, they can go work somewhere else and make more, or, just go down the list. After the big quit, it's just been really, really tough in all areas. And you're going to see that trend coming, and a couple of you mentioned that is, it's a competitive market, not just with public schools and the business community, but public schools versus public schools, depending on where they sit in their revenues. So more to come there, but really an exciting time planning on, a lot of great planning went into these summer programs, and just excited to see that work and that continuing opportunity for students, whether it's families who just need a place for their kiddos and they want to keep the learning going, or those that need that remediation to catch up or stay on track. So a lot going on, a lot of activities, and a lot of camps, so fun time. But summer work is happening.
Fantastic. Next is Board of Education reports. Anyone like to comment?
I will. I just want to say thanks to all of anyone, volunteers, certified team, non-certified team, that worked on putting together our graduations, all the way from Project Search to Dimensions to High to North. They just do a great job. I know that's a lot of work to organize, to put together, but it's so much fun to sit there and watch the families and the kids celebrate, and to be emotional, and to just, watch their kids' lives go through their heads as we attend those, and the banquet at Norman High. And I want to shout out also to getting invited to the FFA banquet. If you haven't ever been, those kids do an incredible job of putting on an entire banquet all by themselves. 100% are the kids, and great public speaking. They do an incredible job. But just a great end of the year, and just want to say thank you to all the people that work so hard to make that happen.
Yeah, it was a great graduation. The place was full. We didn't have to limit guests, so I love it. I do, with all these athletes tonight, I wanted to make sure everybody knew it's the 50th anniversary of Title IX, which is for women's sports. So a lot of people don't even know that that's what Title IX is all about. So I wanted to celebrate that. Also, I feel as a board, we would be remiss if we did not address the tragedy in Texas, Uvalde, and the SROs and the security of our buildings. For anybody here to think that we are where we need to be, we're not. Originally, we were supposed to have these additional 4 SROs, and I don't know, Linda, how long ago that was, 8 years, 9 years ago, and we're still short. And so hopefully that changes, but also our security of our buildings, we always have work to do, and I hope that this board, this administration, continues this community to realize we still can make our schools much, much safer. So it was a very, very difficult thing.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want everyone to know that the city, the incoming mayor, the city manager, myself, the chief of police, we've had multiple sit-down conversations. We have those pretty regularly, but we've had a couple already since then, and there are plans, and they are all on board on upping the number of SROs. There's a lot of interest in the community, and people reaching out and supporting that as well. So but once again, they're also in a staffing issue too, but that's not an excuse. And the most comforting thing is that they recognize this, and they are wanting to step up and do everything they possibly can, which by the vote of the people, quite a few years ago, it did say a certain number of officers, and we are 4 short of that, and not acceptable.
I make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel candidates as listed on the agenda pursuant to Executive Session Authority 25 Oklahoma Statute Section 307B1 and B7.
Second?
Kathy, call the roll.
Cindy Nashard.
Yes.
Chad Weiss.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton.
Yes?
Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
Make a motion to return to open session.
Second?
Kathy, call the roll.
Cindy Nashert.
Yes.
Chad Bice.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton. Yes. Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
All right, the board convened an executive session for the purpose of discussing candidates for the position of assistant principal at Washington Elementary School and the director of professional learning and development. The board was joined in executive session by Superintendent Dr. Nick Migliorino, Associate Superintendent Holly Nevels, Director of Education Services Holly McKinney, and Director of DEI Stephanie Williams. No matters were discussed and no votes were taken while in this closed session. This concludes the minutes of the executive session. Dr. Migliorino, do you have any recommendations?
I do, and remind me, I don't have the agenda right in front of me. Which one's first?
It's assistant principal for Washington.
Okay. So I'm pleased to recommend for the position of assistant principal at Washington Elementary, Ms. Sherry Bennett.
I make a recommendation to hire Ms. Sherry Bennett as the assistant principal at Washington Elementary.
Second?
Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy Nashert.
Yes.
Chad Bice.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton. Yes. Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
Okay, next up, I, once again, am equally excited to recommend for the Director of Professional Learning and Development, Ms. Sarah Seymour.
I make a recommendation to hire Ms. Sarah Seymour as the Director of Professional Learning and Development.
Second?
Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy Nashert.
Yes.
Chad Bice.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton. Yes. Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy Nashert.
Yes.
Chad Bice.
Yes.
Dirk O'Hara.
Yes.
Linda Sexton. Yes. Alex Rogiers.
Yes.
Good evening.